The galaxy was a powder keg. After centuries of political maneuvering, betrayal, and bloodshed, the delicate balance of power had fractured. The three largest factions, the Drakuri Empire, the Thalkor Coalition, and the exiled Kresh, had been engaged in a brutal, endless struggle for control over a resource known as Voidstone. This rare, unstable mineral could warp space and time, and whoever controlled it could reshape the galaxy to their will. Admiral Alyssa Grade stood on the bridge of the Eisenhower, her flagship, staring out at the cold expanse of space. Her fingers drummed the console in front of her, her mind focused on the encrypted message that had arrived only hours before. No one had expected this, a beacon of hope, a chance at peace from an ancient race known as the Silent Ones. They were a mystery, a force long thought to be nothing more than legend. Their existence had been wiped from most historical records, and any mention of them was treated as myth. Yet now, they were offering humanity a chance to broker an end to the Galactic War. "Admiral, we've entered the system," a voice called from behind. Commander Junlei, her right-hand officer, stepped forward, his voice full of quiet urgency. "Coordinates locked. We've been cleared for approach to the station." Gray nodded without turning, her mind still on the implications of the message. The Silent Ones had requested that Earth send its most capable diplomats, scientists, and military leaders to a remote space station, one that sat in the neutral zone, far from the reach of the major factions. The invitation was as mysterious as it was strange. The Silent Ones had given no explanation for why they chose humanity, why now, or why the Peace Summit had to be held so far from any known galactic center. What they did make clear was that it was a one-time offer, and failure to attend meant failure for everyone. "Prepare the team. I want all eyes on this. No mistakes," she ordered, her voice crisp with command. The Eisenhower drifted through the void, approaching the station. It was a colossal structure, completely silent in both name and function. Its exterior was sleek, dark, and unsettling, as if it had been designed to blend with the fabric of space itself. Nothing about it stood out, except for its aura of unsettling calm. No weapons, no markings, only a single docking port. As the ship docked, Gray gathered her team. Ambassador Jonas Reed, a master negotiator with a reputation for reading the most hostile minds. Dr. Celine Carrington, a brilliant scientist and historian who had spent her career studying the ancient civilizations that once ruled the galaxy, and Colonel Victor Rhodes, a hardened veteran of the UAS elite special forces. Before they could even begin to assess the situation, a warning signal flashed. The station's doors had just opened. Gray's heart skipped a beat. They weren't alone. "Admiral," Lai said, his voice low, "we have a problem." Outside the Eisenhower, a dozen enemy ships emerged from the darkness, Drakuri warships, sleek and menacing. They were headed straight for the station, their weapons primed. The ceasefire, which had held for weeks, was now shattered. The Peace Summit, which hadn't even begun, was already under threat. "This isn't a coincidence," Gray muttered, clenching her jaw. "They knew we'd be here." "Prepare for battle," she commanded, "but no shots fired unless they do first." The team moved quickly into the docking bay, preparing for whatever lay ahead. As they exited the ship and entered the station's main corridor, the wall seemed to pulse with an almost eerie energy. They were walking into a trap, one far larger than they could have imagined. But before they could reach the meeting hall, the lights flickered, and a voice echoed from unseen speakers, both alien and ancient. "Welcome, Admiral Gray. Welcome, humanity. The future of the galaxy lies in your hands." The message sent chills down her spine. This wasn't just a peace summit, it was a test of humanity's worth. And the clock was already ticking. The station's eerie silence pressed in on them as they moved deeper into its bowels. Every step echoed in the vast, empty halls, a haunting reminder of how far they were from the conflict raging outside. The wall seemed to shift slightly, almost imperceptibly, as if the station itself was alive, watching them. Gray's instincts screamed that they were being observed, but by whom and why, she couldn't yet tell. The Silent Ones were meant to be a guiding hand, not a threat. At least, that's what the intelligence reports had said. But there was no denying the growing sense of unease. "Admiral, we're being watched," Jonas Reed whispered as they moved through a series of narrow corridors. His eyes darted nervously, though his demeanor remained composed. As humanity's lead negotiator, Reed had faced countless tense negotiations, but nothing like this. Nothing with so much at stake. "I feel it too," Gray replied, her voice steady despite the sudden rush of tension. "Stay sharp." They reached a large, circular chamber, the heart of the station. It was vast and barren, save for a large obsidian table that sat in the center. Around it were tall, angular chairs that seemed to loom, as if inviting them to take a seat. But the room felt cold, like a tomb. A single, low hum filled the air, and there was a faint shimmer of energy around the table. Before they could sit, the lights flickered again, and a strange, ghostly presence filled the room. Gray's skin prickled as the temperature seemed to drop. Then, from the shadows, figures began to materialize, tall, humanoid beings cloaked in darkness, their features obscured by an unnatural, shimmering veil. The Silent Ones. They were not quite of this world. Their forms shifted constantly, like shadows dancing in the light, their movements fluid and unnatural. Their faces were hidden, but their presence was undeniable. Gray could feel their gaze, sharp and piercing, even though she couldn't see their eyes. "We have waited for you, Admiral Gray," one of the beings intoned. Its voice was neither male nor female, but a strange amalgamation of both, echoing in the chamber like the whispers of an ancient, forgotten civilization. "You and your people have been chosen." Gray's heart raced. Chosen? For what? She fought to keep her voice calm. "We're here to end the war, to broker peace, but we need your help." Another Silent One spoke, its voice a soft, reverberating hum that seemed to emanate directly from their minds, bypassing the need for sound. "Peace is not a simple matter, human. It is a balance, one that requires both sacrifice and strength." Reed's face tightened, his calm facade cracking. "And what do you require from us? What's the catch?" The Silent Ones did not respond immediately, their forms shifting once more as if they were deep in thought. The tension in the room thickened. "You must lead," the first Silent One finally said. "Humanity, with all its flaws, has the power to unify the factions. You possess something that the others do not, something they cannot comprehend." Gray exchanged a glance with Reed. This was not the answer they had expected. They had come to broker peace, not to be thrust into the position of power. "And if we refuse?" Gray asked cautiously. The Silent One's form flickered. "Refuse, and the war will continue. Worse, it will escalate beyond control. The Void Stone will become a weapon of unimaginable destruction. The galaxy will burn." There was no trace of emotion in the being's words, only cold, indifferent certainty. It was as though the Silent Ones had seen the end of all things and had decided that humanity was the final hope. Dr. Carrington, who had been silent up until now, stepped forward. "But why us? Why not the Thalcor or the Drakari? Why would you trust a fledgling species like humanity?" Another figure drifted closer, its ethereal form swirling around them like smoke. "Because you have already chosen. You did so the moment you discovered the Void Stone. Humanity's curiosity, your drive to explore, to understand, has brought you to this point." The weight of those words settled over Gray like a heavy cloak. The Silent Ones were not merely observers. They were agents of fate, pushing humanity toward its destiny. But this was not a burden anyone could bear lightly. They were being asked to shoulder a galactic peace that had eluded all the other factions for millennia. The room grew colder still as the Silent Ones made their final demand. "You will unite the factions, Admiral Gray. You will broker the peace that will save the galaxy, or you'll be the ones to see it destroyed. A final, shuddering silence filled the chamber. Gray, Reed, and the rest of the team exchanged looks, each of them grappling with the enormity of what they had just been thrust into. The Silent Ones had chosen humanity, but it was a choice that came with a price. The future of the galaxy rested on their shoulders, and the countdown had already begun. Admiral Alyssa Gray's mind raced as the weight of the Silent One's words pressed down on her. The room was silent again, but the air felt charged, as though the universe itself was holding its breath. The Silent Ones had spoken of balance, of a galaxy on the brink of annihilation, and humanity was now at the center of that fragile balance. Gray took a deep breath, forcing herself to focus. "We didn't come here to be pawns in a cosmic game," she said, her voice firm, though her heart hammered in her chest. "We came to bring peace. If we're going to unite the factions, we need to know exactly what we're up against. How do we convince them? What's your plan?" The Silent One who had spoken earlier materialized before her, its form twisting and flickering like a dark mirage. "The factions do not need to be convinced. They already know the cost of continued conflict. The Drakari Empire, the Thalkor Coalition, and the exiled Kresh, each has its own weaknesses. Each has its own fears. Use them, but remember, peace is fragile. It will not be won in a single stroke." Gray clenched her fists. This was no longer just diplomacy, it was war by other means. They were being asked to manipulate the fears and desires of entire civilizations, to play a dangerous game of power and influence. The stakes couldn't be higher. Jonas Reed stepped forward, his brow furrowed in thought. The Silent Ones are right. Each faction is on the brink. The Drakari have been pushed to the edge of extinction by internal strife. The Thalkor are fracturing under the weight of their own bureaucracy. And the Kresh, they are no better off fighting a losing battle for control of their homeworlds. Gray turned to him, her eyes narrowing, but they're not going to give up their power without a fight. You saw the Drakari fleet out there. If we don't act quickly, this peace will be nothing more than a dream. The war will burn everything to the ground before it even starts. Reed nodded. They'll resist, but we're the last chance they've got. The Silent Ones weren't exaggerating when they said the Voidstone could be weaponized. If they get their hands on it first, we'll be facing a new kind of war, a war where the rules of physics don't apply. Dr. Celine Carrington, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. The Voidstone is the key. The Silent Ones wouldn't have chosen us if we didn't have the potential to understand and control it. But what we don't know is why they're so certain that humanity can bring about the peace they've envisioned. What makes us different from the other factions? Gray exchanged a look with Reed. Maybe that's something we need to figure out before we go back to the table. The team fell silent, lost in thought. The walls of the chamber seemed to pulse, as though the Silent Ones were waiting for something. Gray felt an unsettling presence in the air, as if the room itself was watching them, listening. The silence was broken by the soft, disembodied voice of the Silent Ones. Your mission is simple: unite or perish. Time is not on your side. You will meet with the leaders of each faction. You will broker an accord, but you must do so carefully. Trust no one but yourselves. Gray's stomach twisted at the final words. Trust no one. How could they broker peace when the very people they were supposed to convince might be the ones who would stab them in the back? The thought was chilling. Admiral, we've been given a single shot at this, Reed said quietly, his voice resolute. We're walking into a hornet's nest. But if we succeed, humanity will have a seat at the table, no matter what comes next. Gray looked out the window of the chamber, her eyes scanning the distant stars. The factions were already in motion. They would need to act fast before the war escalated into something no one could control. It was a delicate web they were about to weave. Each word, each gesture would carry the weight of billions of lives. One misstep, and it would all collapse. "Get the comms online," she ordered. "We'll need to contact the leaders of the factions as soon as possible. I'm not waiting for them to make the first move." Her team nodded, each of them understanding the gravity of what lay ahead. They would have to convince the Drukhari Emperor, the Thalkor High Council, and the Kresh Warlord, each of them proud, arrogant, and deeply distrustful of humanity. If they were going to succeed, they would need to push aside centuries of animosity, ingrained suspicion, and the brutal desire for power. But the clock was ticking. With the Void Stone at stake, every moment counted, and the galaxy was holding its breath. The Bridge of the Valor was a hive of controlled chaos as the crew prepared for the first of many high-stakes meetings. The flickering holograms of the Drukhari fleet flashed before Gray's eyes, an unsettling reminder of the power they wielded. The Drukhari Emperor had made it clear they would not entertain peace unless it was on their terms that would see their enemies crushed underfoot. "Admiral, the Drukhari response is coming in." Reed's voice cut through the tension. He sat at the communications console, his fingers dancing across the holographic interface as the first transmission signal appeared. Gray steeled herself, her fingers gripping the edge of the table. They were about to open the most dangerous conversation of their lives. It wasn't just diplomacy, it was a delicate dance on the precipice of war. One wrong word, one miscalculation, and the entire galaxy could spiral into an irreversible conflict. The Drukhari leader's face appeared on the holoscreen, a grimacing visage of green scales and piercing eyes. Emperor Talesh's mouth twisted into a sneer as he leaned forward, his voice sharp with authority. "Admiral Gray, you have one chance to convince me why I should waste my time with your pathetic human peace talks. Your species has been a thorn in my side for far too long." Gray swallowed the knot in her throat, but her voice remained calm, steady. "Emperor Talesh, we're not here to beg for mercy. We're here because the war has reached a point where it will consume everything, including the Drukhari Empire. The time for endless fighting is over. We can either come to an agreement now or face utter destruction. The Void Stone is real, and if you don't act quickly, the consequences will be dire for everyone." Talesh's eyes narrowed as he listened. The silence that followed seemed to stretch for an eternity before he spoke again, his voice low but tinged with curiosity. "The Void Stone? You think I will trust you, human, to control such a weapon?" Gray didn't flinch. "No, but you need to trust us. Humanity's need for survival is just as strong as yours. We've seen the truth, and we've come to offer you a seat at the table, but only if you lay down your weapons and consider the future of your people." There was a long pause. The tension between them crackled, thick and suffocating. Gray knew the Emperor's pride would not allow him to bow easily, but she had to push, had to make him see that the Void Stone wasn't just a weapon, it was a tool that could change the galaxy's fate. Finally, Talesh spoke, his voice laced with disdain. "I will not bow to you, human, but your words have intrigued me. If you truly believe you can deliver, then I will listen. But know this, you fail, and I will wipe your species from existence." His image flickered as he ended the transmission, the cold finality of his words hanging in the air. The bridge fell silent, the weight of the Emperor's threat pressing heavily on the crew. "That could have gone worse," Reed muttered, trying to ease the tension, but his face betrayed his anxiety. Gray straightened, exhaling a slow breath she didn't realize she was holding. "It's not over yet. The Drukhari are still dangerous, and their pride is a weapon in itself. We have to be careful how we play our next move. Convincing the Drukhari to accept peace is only half the battle. Now we need the Thalkor to come to the table." Carrington glanced up from her console, her brow furrowed. "The Thalkor won't be easy. Their society is based on bureaucracy, and their leaders are tied up in endless debates. It'll take more than just words to sway them." Gray nodded grimly. "Then we'll have to find their weaknesses. Everyone has a breaking point, even the Thalkor." She glanced at Reed. "Prepare for the next meeting. The Thalkor will be more elusive than the Drakari, but we'll get them to listen, one way or another. The crew set to their tasks with a renewed sense of urgency. They had just one chance to succeed, and they knew it. Gray walked to the observation window, her gaze sweeping over the stars. There were no guarantees in this delicate game, but failure wasn't an option. The galaxy's fate rested in their hands, and with each passing moment, the pressure mounted. They had survived the Drakari's threat. Now, it was time to face the Thalkor and the Kresh. The pieces were in motion, and soon they would know if the Silent Ones had truly chosen humanity for this impossible task, or if they were doomed to fall like so many before them. One misstep, and the galaxy would fall into chaos. But if they succeeded, they might just change the course of history forever. The Thalkor embassy was nothing like the imposing Drakari ships or the Kresh war bunkers. It was a sprawling, almost peaceful station orbiting a tranquil moon, its architecture fluid, with towering spires and open terraces. Yet beneath its calm exterior, Alyssa Gray felt the tension that had been building since they first made contact. The Thalkor weren't just a bureaucratic machine. They were a people entrenched in their own sense of superiority and pride. Their obsession with structure, order, and hierarchy would make any negotiation delicate at best. Gray stood before the elongated table in the heart of the embassy's negotiation hall, flanked by her most trusted officers. Reed, Carrington, and even her own military advisor, Lieutenant Colonel Cade Talbot, were by her side. The Thalkor delegation was just arriving, their formal robes flowing like streams of living silk, each individual an embodiment of their race's elegance. But Gray knew better than to be taken in by appearances. These were not simple diplomats. They were players in a long game of intergalactic chess, and humanity was a mere pawn in their eyes. The lead Thalkor ambassador, Kessler, was a towering figure, his skin a deep shade of violet, his eyes black pools of calculation. He inclined his head with an air of detached curiosity as he took his seat, his hands folded in front of him, as though holding a secret that only he understood. The rest of the delegation followed suit, their movements synchronized in a way that only those deeply indoctrinated in their rigid culture could achieve. Gray, despite her earlier resolve, couldn't suppress the creeping unease in the pit of her stomach. The Drakari had been brutal, but at least they were direct in their threats. The Thalkor? They could strike without warning, manipulating the rules of diplomacy and creating alliances that no one saw coming until it was too late. To outmaneuver them, she would have to think several steps ahead. "We appreciate your time, Ambassador Kessler," Gray began, her voice calm, but carrying the weight of authority. "We're here because we believe that the factions must come together before the galaxy is consumed by conflict." Kessler's gaze did not waver, but his lips curled in the slightest of smiles, a smile that was not entirely friendly. "You humans are always so quick to speak of peace, yet you lack the understanding of the true balance of power. The Thalkor are not in need of peace, Admiral. We are already in control. It is the other factions who cannot accept this reality. You, however, you are merely a passing curiosity." Gray narrowed her eyes, but kept her composure. "I didn't come here to argue control. I came here because I know the Thalkor aren't blind to the consequences of continuing this war. The Void Stone is real, and if it falls into the wrong hands, it will obliterate everything in its path. No one will be left to rule. Humanity understands this, which is why we're offering you a seat at the table. The Drakari might be your enemy, but even they understand that the threat is bigger than all of you." Kessler's eyes flickered for a moment, his gaze sharp as though calculating the weight of her words. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity, but just when Gray thought he might speak, he simply leaned back in his chair, his eyes glimmering with amusement. "You believe that your Void Stone is the key to peace," Kessler said slowly, his voice like the echo of a far-off storm. "But peace is a fragile thing. It is not simply won by words, Admiral. It is won by power. And right now, you and your species hold none. You're too young, too unpredictable. The Thalcor have weathered the storms of this galaxy for millennia, and we will continue to do so, with or without your help. Reed shifted nervously, but Gray held up a hand, silencing him. She needed to stay in control. Then let me put it another way. If you refuse to join the talks, if you refuse to stand with humanity against this greater threat, then you will find yourself alone when the Voidstone's true power is unleashed. You can continue to control your people and your borders, but the galaxy will burn around you. Kessler's smile faded, replaced by a calculating gleam. You do not know the power we hold, Admiral. You cannot even begin to comprehend the web we have woven over the millennia. If the Voidstone's power is so great, then perhaps it is best left in our hands after all. Humanity may be more useful than I first thought. The tension in the room thickened as Kessler stood, his eyes locking onto Gray's with a newfound intensity. I will take this proposition to my people. But know this, if you wish for peace, you must show us your worth. Words alone will not be enough. You will have to prove it. As the Thalcor delegation filed out of the room, Gray's heart hammered in her chest. They had come closer to a deal than she'd expected, but something in Kessler's words rang hollow, a threat veiled as an opportunity. Do you think he'll back us? Talbot asked, his voice low. Gray didn't answer immediately, her gaze lingering on the closed doors. There was too much at play here, too many variables. She pushed the Thalcor closer to peace, but the price would be steep. The next step would be crucial. I think, she said slowly, her voice laced with uncertainty, the real test will come when we meet the Kresh. And with that, the reality of their mission hit home. There were no easy victories here. The galaxy was teetering on the edge, and the Silent Ones had placed humanity at the center of it all. The pieces were falling into place, but the final move could still destroy everything they had worked for. The Kresh fleet was unlike anything Gray had ever encountered. The gargantuan warships, each more like a mobile fortress than a vessel, loomed in the distance, their jagged, almost insectoid forms a stark contrast to the sleek ships of the Thalcor. The Kresh were an ancient species, their entire culture steeped in combat and conquest, and their reputation for cruelty was unmatched. They had never been swayed by diplomacy, and no one had ever successfully brokered peace with them. Humanity, it seemed, was about to test that impossible feat. Gray paced in the command center of the Valor, her mind racing as the crew prepared for the high-stakes negotiation. The Kresh were expected to arrive within the hour, their demands for sovereignty and control over the Voidstone's fate well documented. They would not negotiate for peace, they would only bargain for power. To win them over, Gray would need to appeal to their pride, their lust for control, while keeping them from destroying everything. Reed was at the communication station, his brow furrowed as he monitored the incoming signals. Admiral, the Kresh are initiating contact. Gray straightened, her mind sharpening. This was it. If they failed here, there would be no going back. She had come too far and risked too much to back down now. Patch it through, she said, her voice steady. The screen flickered, and the face of the Kresh High Commander, Racker, appeared. His skin was a deep red, marked with dark scars from countless battles. His eyes gleamed with the cold, calculating intelligence of a predator, and his lips twisted into a cruel, predatory grin. Admiral Gray, he rumbled, his voice deep and gravelly. I was wondering when you humans would come crawling to us for help. What makes you think the Kresh would be interested in your peace talks? Gray held his gaze, unwavering. We're not here to beg for help, Commander. We're here to offer you a position of power in the new galaxy we are trying to build. The Voidstone is a weapon of unimaginable power, and it must be handled carefully. If it falls into the wrong hands, it will destroy everything, including your people. Racker chuckled darkly. You think we are afraid of a weapon. The Kresh are not a species to cower before threats. We are conquerors. We take what we want. Gray leaned forward, her voice dropping to a level of cold intensity. Then you understand the danger, Commander. The Void Stone can be used to obliterate entire civilizations, and even the Kresh will not be able to withstand its wrath. I'm offering you an opportunity to wield its power, but you have to work with us. There are others who would destroy everything we fought for. We cannot afford to let them succeed. Racker's grin faded as he considered her words. And what makes you think the Kresh would align with you? You, a young species, still struggling to find your place in the galaxy? The Thalcor would never allow it. You'll be destroyed before you can even make your first move. We can all be destroyed if we don't act now, Gray said, her voice tight with urgency. But together, we can seize control of the Void Stone. We can build a new order, one where power is shared, not hoarded. I'm not asking you to trust me, Commander. I'm asking you to trust the future. There was a long silence as Racker studied her, his expression unreadable. Gray could feel the weight of the moment bearing down on her, every second stretching out like an eternity. The Kresh were not a race that valued trust, and yet she had to find a way to make them see that their best option for survival lay in cooperation. Finally, Racker spoke, his voice low and menacing. You speak of trust, human, but trust is a luxury the Kresh cannot afford. We take what we need, and we destroy what threatens us. Your peace talks will fail. You will fail. Gray's heart raced, but she did not back down. You're wrong, Commander. If you destroy everything, there will be nothing left to conquer. No prey to hunt, no enemies to defeat. The galaxy will be reduced to rubble. There will be no empire, no glory, only ashes. But if you stand with us, together we can reshape the future. We can control the Void Stone and dictate the future of the galaxy. Racker's cold eyes flickered with something, perhaps doubt, perhaps curiosity. Gray couldn't tell. She had pushed him to a point, but whether it was enough to sway him, she couldn't be sure. You think you can change the galaxy with your words, human? He asked, his voice now a dangerous whisper. You are nothing more than a child playing in the ruins of empires. I may be a child, Gray replied, her tone steely, but I'm not alone. Humanity is capable of things no one expected. If you want to be on the winning side of this war, then you'll listen. The Void Stone won't care who sits on the throne when it destroys everything. But if you choose wisely, you can survive and thrive. Racker's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, Gray wondered if she had pushed him too far. Then, unexpectedly, he nodded, a dark smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. You have made an interesting offer, Admiral. Perhaps I will consider your words. With that, he cut the transmission, leaving Gray to stare at the empty screen. She had played the Kresh's game, but the outcome was still uncertain. The Kresh were dangerous, unpredictable, and only time would tell if they could truly be convinced to join the fragile alliance. But one thing was clear, the fight for the galaxy's future was far from over, and humanity's role in it was only just beginning. The tension in the fleet was palpable. After the Kresh's cryptic response, Gray found herself in a constant state of vigilance. The Valor was still orbiting the neutral zone, a location far enough from the Kresh homeworld to ensure their ships couldn't easily strike, but close enough to maintain contact. Every creak of the ship's hull felt like an omen, every blip on the radar a potential harbinger of war. But even as the military sensors buzzed with the constant activity of the nearby fleets, it was the human spirit, not just technology, that gave Gray the strength to press on. They were walking a razor's edge, and one wrong move could end in disaster. Still, she had no choice but to keep pushing forward. The conference room in the Valor was filled with the senior officers of the fleet and representatives from the Thalcor. The silence was oppressive as they waited for Gray's signal. She knew she needed to rally her team. The stakes had never been higher. Their enemy was fractured, but they were far from weak. The void between victory and catastrophe was razor thin, and their actions in the coming days could tip the scale in either direction. "Admiral," Reed said, breaking the silence, his voice low. "We've detected multiple Kresh warships moving into position near the neutral zone. They're forming a perimeter." Gray's eyes flicked to the holographic display at the center of the table. The Kresh were organizing, positioning themselves for something. The Thalcor had been quiet since the meeting, which was not unusual. Diplomacy was a slow burn for them. But this sudden Kresh action was a clear sign that they had made up their minds about something. "Their next move is coming. We have to be ready," Gray said, her voice firm. "Prepare for any eventuality, but maintain a posture of diplomacy. We don't want to escalate this prematurely." The Thalcor representative, Ambassador Kessler, raised an eyebrow. "Are you sure this is the right approach, Admiral? The Kresh are not known for their patience. If they want conflict, they will initiate it regardless of your so-called peace talks." Gray gave him a hard look. "Then we show them that we are not so easily intimidated. We don't negotiate from a position of weakness. Let them make the first move." Kessler's lips curled into a smile, though his eyes remained cold. "A risky game you play, Admiral. But your humanity is interesting. You think you can sway the Kresh, but they will only respect you if you can prove your strength." "I know that," Gray responded, her tone biting. "But they also respect intelligence, and right now, their greatest asset is their unpredictability. We need to ensure they don't feel cornered." Before Kessler could retort, the room was filled with an urgent message. Reed's voice rang through the silence. "Admiral, we've received a transmission from the Kresh fleet. It's encrypted, but it's addressed directly to us." Gray stood up sharply, the hairs on the back of her neck prickling. This was it, the moment they had all been waiting for. She motioned for Reed to open the transmission. The screen flickered to life, and the form of Racker, the Kresh High Commander, filled the screen once more. His face was unreadable, his eyes narrowed in cold calculation. "Admiral Gray," he began, his voice as steady as a blade's edge. "I have taken your words into consideration. The Kresh do not make alliances lightly, nor do we bend to threats. But you speak of power, of survival, of reshaping the galaxy. I believe we can come to an understanding." Gray leaned forward, her heart pounding in her chest. "What are you proposing, Commander?" Racker's lips curled into a smile, but it was anything but warm. "I will give you the opportunity to prove your worth. You and your fleet will escort us to the coordinates I will send shortly. There, we will discuss the future of the Voidstone and determine who will be its rightful custodian. You will not try to betray us, or I will consider this negotiation over. No second chances." The screen went black as Racker ended the transmission abruptly. Gray sat back down, her mind racing. The Kresh had made their move. Now, they would see if humanity could play the game at their level. "This is it," Gray muttered, her voice low but fierce. "We'll have to take them at their word for now, but we need to be prepared. If they try anything—" "We'll be ready," Cade Talbot interrupted, his expression grim. "We'll follow the Kresh fleet to their location, but I don't trust them, Admiral. We should consider all contingencies. If they make a move, we strike first." Gray nodded. "We're not going to let them walk over us. We have one chance at this, and we have to make it count. Let's move out." The crew sprang into action, moving with the precision of a well-oiled machine. The Valor powered up its engines, and the fleet began to follow the Kresh warships, ready for whatever came next. Gray stood on the bridge, staring out at the stars. She had played her cards carefully. Now, she had to hope that the Kresh would not call her bluff. As the fleet jumped into warp speed, she could feel the weight of destiny pressing down on her. Humanity was at the precipice of something great, or the edge of annihilation. There was no turning back now. The vast, cold expanse of space stretched out before Gray and her crew, the distant stars twinkling like the fragile threads of fate that held the galaxy together. They followed the Kresh fleet through the void, the massive warships now within striking distance of their destination, a remote, uncharted system near the galactic core. The Kresh were taking them to an isolated location where their true intentions would be revealed. There was no going back now. Gray's thoughts were a storm of conflicting emotions as she stood on the bridge of the Valor, watching the Kresh fleet ahead. The Thalkor had been oddly quiet, their own warships hanging in the background, as if waiting for the right moment to intervene. She had expected more action from them, but the silence made her uneasy. It was a silence that could mean compliance or betrayal. "Admiral, we're nearing the coordinates." Reed's voice interrupted her thoughts. "We're entering the system now. The Kresh are slowing down." Gray took a deep breath, steadying herself. This was it. The meeting would either solidify their alliance or shatter any hopes of peace. She couldn't afford to let her guard down. Not now. "Keep alert, everyone," Gray said, her voice sharp and commanding. "We don't know what they're planning. Prepare for all contingencies." The Valor slowed as they entered the system, its engines humming steadily. A dark, rocky planet loomed ahead, its surface scarred and barren, devoid of life. It was an ancient world, one that had once been a thriving colony but had long since been abandoned after a catastrophic war. It was the perfect place for the Kresh to make their stand, a place where no one could witness what would happen next. The Kresh warships began to orbit the planet, signaling their arrival. The transmission came through again, this time from Racker himself. "Admiral Gray," he said, his voice echoing through the comms. "Welcome to the heart of Kresh territory. We will speak of the future of the Voidstone here, where no one can interfere. Prepare for our arrival." The transmission ended abruptly, and the screen flickered off. Gray's chest tightened as the Valor aligned itself with the Kresh ships, each one a menacing shadow against the backdrop of the barren planet. "I don't like this," Kessler, the Thalkor ambassador, muttered, his reptilian eyes narrowed in suspicion. "This planet, it's too quiet. They've planned something." Gray turned to face him. "You don't trust them, do you?" "I trust no one in this game," Kessler replied, his tone dark. "Not the Kresh, not the Thalkor, and certainly not humans who think they can change the balance of power. But you've played your cards well, Admiral. Let's see if the Kresh really want peace, or if they're simply buying time." The doors to the conference room slid open, and Gray took one last, lingering look at the crew. They had come so far, and now they were about to face the culmination of everything. She had pushed humanity to the edge, taken risks no one had expected. It was all on the line now. The Valor docked with one of the Kresh ships, and Gray, along with Kessler and Reed, prepared to disembark. The atmosphere in the docking bay was heavy with the weight of uncertainty. The Kresh were a people of power and tradition, their honor defined by blood and battle. Whatever happened here would mark a turning point in galactic history. Racker was waiting for them when they entered the Kresh ship, his towering form standing in stark contrast to the sleek human presence in the room. His dark red skin glistened in the dim light, and his eyes burned with intensity. The Kresh High Commander did not extend a hand, did not offer a greeting. He simply stared down at Gray, sizing her up. "You've brought yourself here, human," Racker rumbled. "Do you think your words will convince me that humanity is worthy of holding the Voidstone? That you are capable of wielding the power that is rightfully mine?" Gray stood her ground, her eyes locked on his. "I don't think I need to convince you of anything, Commander. The Voidstone isn't just power, it's a responsibility. Humanity understands that responsibility, and we're offering you a place in a new order, one where we all share control over the future. But we cannot do this alone. If we fall, the galaxy falls with us." Racker's expression remained unreadable. "I do not trust easy bargains, human. But your persistence, it intrigues me. Perhaps we will test your offer." The silence stretched for a long, tense moment. Then, without warning, Racker stepped aside, revealing a table laden with the ancient relics of Kresh history. At its center, the Voidstone, a pulsating core of energy, glowing with an ethereal light, rested in a protective casing. It was as powerful as the legends had described, a silent force capable of shaping the future of the galaxy. "You speak of responsibility," Racker said, his voice low and dangerous. "Let us see if you can handle it." Gray felt the weight of his words sink into her bones. The Creche had agreed to hear her out, but the final decision was still to be made. It wasn't enough to simply offer peace. Humanity would have to prove they deserved the future they had fought so hard to claim. As Racker gestured toward the Voidstone, Gray knew that the true test was about to begin. The Creche were not just testing humanity's will, they were testing its soul. And in that moment, Gray realized that the galaxy would not be saved by diplomacy alone. It would be saved by courage, by sacrifice, and by the unyielding drive of humanity to build a future worth fighting for. It was a choice, one that could tip the balance of the galaxy forever.